The human had never felt so small in the vastness of space. The mission had seemed simple at first. A diplomatic visit to a distant colony, an exchange of knowledge, and the chance to learn from civilizations older than humanity itself. Yet nothing had prepared them for what came next. The colony on the remote planet seemed peaceful from a distance. Its cities glimmered under the twin suns, and the fields stretched for miles, glowing with alien flora that pulsed faintly in the light. From orbit, it was easy to imagine life there as calm and orderly. But appearances could be deceiving, and that truth struck with terrifying force. It had begun with a tremor beneath the colony's surface. Buildings shook, alarms rang, and panic spread like wildfire. Citizens ran through the streets, clutching what they could, their faces etched with fear. The human had been nearby, helping coordinate a research station's energy grid, when the first explosion ripped through the center of the city. A massive column of smoke rose, twisting into the sky as cries of confusion and terror filled the air. There was no time to question why. Instinct had taken over. They had sprinted toward the chaos, hoping to help, to pull someone out of the rubble, but what they found instead was accusation. From the very moment they arrived at the scene, eyes turned toward them. The alien guards, towering beings with multiple limbs and armor that reflected the sun in blinding flashes, advanced quickly. Their expressions were unreadable, but the anger and suspicion were clear. "You," one of them hissed, pointing a clawed hand. "You brought this disaster upon us." The human froze, disbelief mixing with the adrenaline that still surged through their veins. They opened their mouth to protest, but the words caught in their throat. How could they be blamed? They hadn't caused the explosion. They had come to help, to observe, to ensure safety. And yet, the Council of the alien civilization seemed ready to declare guilt without proof. The feeling was suffocating, like being trapped in a storm with no shelter. Soon, a message came through the translator on their suit. The Alien Council had convened an emergency session. Every gesture, every movement was scrutinized. The human could feel the weight of hundreds of alien eyes on them, each one convinced they were the cause of this devastation. Panic began to creep in, but they fought it down. Rational thought had to prevail. Evidence had to matter. There had to be a mistake. Surely, reason could win, but reason was not enough. Before they knew it, they were being escorted, or rather herded, toward the council chambers. The journey felt endless. Outside the transport, the city continued to burn, smoke curling into the alien sky. Ships hovered overhead, scanning, recording, observing. The human tried to explain, pointing at the control panels they had been monitoring, the safety protocols they had followed, the steps they had taken to prevent disaster. Each explanation was met with silence or a shake of the alien leaders' heads. Inside the council chambers, everything felt surreal. The walls glimmered with alien symbols that shifted and moved, almost alive, and the floor hummed faintly as though resonating with some ancient energy. The council members floated slightly above the ground, their bodies elongated and adorned with ornaments that reflected status and power. Their voices, amplified by unseen devices, echoed with a chilling authority. They didn't ask questions. They didn't debate. They declared. The human's guilt was assumed. "You stand accused of the destruction of our colony," one of the leaders intoned. "You have violated the laws of all civilized worlds. Judgment will be swift." The words struck like a physical blow. Guilt imposed without trial, without investigation, without a chance to explain. Fear welled up, but so did defiance. The human refused to bow. They refused to let this be the end of their story. But even defiance felt small against such overwhelming power. They were taken to a holding area, a vast chamber with walls that shimmered faintly, designed to suppress movement and prevent escape. Here, time became meaningless. Food and water were provided in small amounts, but the days blurred into one another. The human was alone, except for the occasional guards who observed silently, never speaking, never explaining. Each day was a test of patience, endurance, and mental strength. They had to cling to reason, to remember who they were, and to trust that truth had a way of coming out, no matter how long it took. During the long hours of isolation, memories of home returned unbidden. Faces of loved ones, quiet mornings, laughter shared over simple meals, all of it felt impossibly distant. The human realized that this trial was more than a test of survival. It was a test of identity, of courage, of whether they could maintain hope in a world that seemed intent on crushing it. They reminded themselves that they had faced challenges before, but never like this. Never with the weight of an entire galaxy assuming guilt resting squarely on their shoulders. Despite the despair, a spark of determination grew. The human began to observe their surroundings carefully, noting patterns in guard rotations, the layout of the chamber, even the subtle hints of weakness in the security systems. Every detail mattered. Escape wasn't just a dream, it was a necessity. But even beyond escape, there was a bigger goal. They had to clear their name, to show the Council and the galaxy that justice was not blind to truth. It was during one of these long hours that the human first heard whispers among the guards. Faint, almost imperceptible, but there. Words about an artifact, a device from an ancient civilization long lost, said to judge truth itself. The artifact had never been seen by the Council, yet stories suggested it could reveal guilt or innocence beyond doubt. For the first time in weeks, a sense of possibility entered the human's mind. Perhaps there was a way to prove innocence that no accusation, no prejudice, could obscure. Perhaps there was a way to fight back that didn't rely solely on persuasion or luck. That night, as the twin moons cast faint light through the chamber's narrow windows, the human lay on the cold floor and envisioned what they would do next. They would survive. They would find the artifact. They would show the Council the truth. And if necessary, they would face any danger, traverse any world, and confront any obstacle. They were no longer just a visitor, no longer just a representative of humanity. They were a person fighting for justice in a galaxy that had denied it. Sleep came fitfully. But the human dreamed of distant ruins, glowing with ancient power, and of a voice that would recognize them as more than a mere accused. In the dreams, the artifact spoke without words, a sensation rather than sound, affirming that it could sense their courage, their honesty, and their determination. Waking from that dream, the human felt a strange calm. They were still in chains, still accused, still facing unimaginable odds. But for the first time, hope had a tangible shape. The next day, the Council continued its proceedings, ignoring any plea or explanation. Yet the human's mind had shifted. They no longer waited for justice to be granted. They would seek it. Every action, every observation, every moment of patience was a step toward the journey that lay ahead. The galaxy might see them as guilty now, but they knew the truth. And somewhere, in the ruins of a civilization older than imagination, an artifact awaited that could make the galaxy see the truth to God in that moment, alone and surrounded by suspicion, fear, and anger. The human made a silent vow. They would not just survive. They would become the force that reminded the galaxy that justice mattered, that truth could not be silenced, and that even one human, against all odds, could stand against the judgment of worlds. The days in the holding chamber continued, each one a test, each one a preparation. Every step, every thought, every plan became a quiet rebellion against the imposed guilt. And in the quiet, the human understood that this was only the beginning. The real journey, the journey toward the artifact, toward vindication, toward justice, was about to begin. And when it did, nothing would be the same again. The human had been held for days, then weeks, in a cold, dim chamber. Every day was the same, watching the guards, listening to the whispers in the shadows, thinking, planning. At first, fear had dominated every thought, but slowly, determination began to take its place. Survival alone was not enough anymore. They had to escape. But escape was only the first step. The bigger goal, the one that burned like a quiet fire in their chest, was to prove their innocence. To do that, they needed the artifact. Escape, of course, would not be easy. The transport ships, patrols, and surveillance systems of the alien civilization were unlike anything humanity had faced before. Every door was protected by energy fields, every corridor watched by cameras and sensors, and every guard trained to respond instantly to the slightest disturbance. Yet, the human had spent every moment of confinement observing. The guards were not infallible. They moved in patterns, followed routines, and like any living creature, had habits that could be predicted. It was this knowledge, the subtle weaknesses of their captors, that became the foundation of the plan. Night fell over the planet, and the twin moons cast a pale light over the city outside. It was during this quiet hour that the human decided to act. Moving silently, they observed the guards changing shifts. One moved slower than the others, pausing too long at a corner before continuing. Another glanced back repeatedly, suspicious, but unaware of the opening they had left in their patrol. The human waited for the precise moment, heart pounding, breath steady. Timing was everything. One misstep, one alert, and it would all be over. When the moment came, the human moved with a grace born of desperation. Each step was calculated, every movement deliberate. The energy field that barred the exit flickered momentarily, a glitch that lasted less than a second, but it was enough. With a small tool they had hidden, they bypassed the lock and slipped through the field. The corridor beyond stretched into darkness, but the human did not hesitate. Each footstep was measured, every sound carefully controlled. Escape was not just physical, it was mental. Panic could ruin everything. They focused on nothing but the path ahead, the distant dream of freedom, and the artifact that awaited them. Outside the chamber, the air was thick with the smell of the city at night. Smoke from the earlier disaster still lingering faintly, mixed with the alien scent of strange vegetation. The streets were quiet but dangerous. Patrols moved silently, their armor reflecting the moonlight, sensors sweeping for intruders. The human crouched in shadows, slipping from alley to alley, learning the rhythm of the city, feeling the pulse of life and fear around them. Each step was a negotiation with danger, a test of nerves, and a lesson in patience. For hours, they moved through the city, avoiding patrols and cameras, using knowledge gained in days of observation. They had prepared for this moment, yet every instant was a test. A single miscalculation could end it all. At times, the human had to stop completely, pressing against walls as enormous alien ships flew overhead, scanning the streets below. They held their breath as shadows passed too close, as sensors swept the area in long, sweeping arcs. Survival required patience, calm, and the ability to act without hesitation. And slowly, inch by inch, the human moved closer to freedom. By dawn, the city lay quiet under the pale light of the rising suns. The human had reached the outskirts, where the alien architecture gave way to rocky terrain and wild, untamed lands. Here, the patrols were thinner, less predictable, and the risk shifted from technology to environment. Jagged rocks jutted from the ground, and alien wildlife stirred in the shadows. One misstep could mean injury, and injury could mean capture. Yet, in this danger, the human felt a strange exhilaration. They were no longer trapped. They were moving toward a goal that no one else had dared to reach. The journey through the alien wilderness was harsh and unforgiving. The terrain seemed endless mountains that glowed faintly in the twilight, rivers of liquid that shimmered unnaturally, and forests of plants that reacted to movement, swaying or curling as if aware of intruders. The human had to navigate carefully, using skills honed from years of survival training. Every step was a lesson in caution, every pause a chance to listen to the alien world around them. At times, they slept in small caves, pressing themselves against walls to avoid detection. Hunger and exhaustion pressed on them, but the thought of the artifact and the chance to prove their innocence fueled them. During these long hours, the human remembered stories they had heard of ancient civilizations, long gone, whose technology and wisdom had shaped the galaxy in ways few could imagine. Among these legends, the artifact was spoken of in hushed tones. It was said to recognize truth and justice, to see the intentions of hearts, and to reveal guilt and innocence with undeniable clarity. The human did not know if the stories were true, but the possibility gave them hope. Hope became a compass, guiding every step, pushing them forward through hunger, exhaustion, and fear. One night, as they crossed a narrow canyon, the human stumbled upon a faint glow in the distance. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, a reflection from the moons or distant stars. But as they moved closer, the glow took shape, emanating from the entrance to a cave. Symbols etched into the rock pulsed with a faint blue light, almost alive. The human's heart raced. Could this be it? Could this be the place where the artifact awaited? They approached cautiously, studying every marking, every shadow dot inside the cave. The air felt different, charged with an energy that was hard to describe. The walls shimmered faintly, and a soft hum filled the space, vibrating through the ground and into the human's bones. And then, in the center of the chamber, they saw it. The artifact. A crystalline device, hovering slightly above a pedestal, glowing with an inner light that shifted in color and intensity. It seemed to watch, almost sentient, as if aware of the human's presence. The human took a deep breath, approaching slowly, feeling the weight of countless generations of stories and legends pressing on them. They could feel the artifact's power, a sense of judgment, of understanding, of truth. They extended a hand, uncertain, yet drawn by an invisible force. The light brightened, surrounding them in warmth, and for a moment, time seemed so slow. The artifact examined them, sensing not only their actions, but their intentions, their heart, their mind, and then a quiet recognition. The artifact pulsed gently, and a voice soft, clear, without sound resonated in the human's mind. It acknowledged them as more than a fugitive, more than an accused. It recognized them as someone capable of justice, of truth, of bearing the responsibility that few could endure. In that moment, the human felt a shift, a clarity that went beyond words. They were no longer alone. They had an ally, a power beyond themselves, to reveal what had been hidden, to challenge the false judgment of the council, to protect the innocent. With the artifact now in their possession, the human began the journey back, not just as someone fleeing danger, but as someone armed with purpose. The path ahead would be even more dangerous, for they would not only have to return to confront those who had judged them, but also evade every threat seeking to prevent truth from emerging. Yet fear no longer dominated. It had been replaced by resolve. Every step, every decision, every movement was now guided by the certainty that justice, once recognized, could never be denied. As they navigated the alien wilderness once more, the human thought of the council, of the city that had accused them, of the people who had judged them without proof. They would face them, yes, but not with anger or revenge. They would face them with truth, with evidence that no power could obscure. The artifact would not lie. Their innocence, their courage, and their determination would be made clear to all. And if necessary, they would travel across the galaxy, to every world that doubted them, until the record of injustice was corrected. by the time the twin suns rose again, casting pale light over jagged mountains and glowing forests. The human was no longer the same person who had first been accused. The fear that had gripped them, the despair that had threatened to consume them, had transformed into a quiet strength, a determination forged in hardship and tempered by resolve. The artifact pulsed at their side, a silent companion, a beacon of hope, and a promise that the fight for justice was only beginning. The human paused at the edge of a cliff, looking out at the vast alien world below. It was dangerous, unfamiliar, and full of unknown threats, yet it was also filled with possibility. They could feel the weight of their mission, the responsibility that had been thrust upon them, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like purpose. With the artifact, they would return. They would face the council, expose the truth, and ensure that justice was not just a word, but a reality that could be seen, measured, and recognized. And with that thought, they began their descent, moving with care, precision, and unwavering determination. The journey was far from over. The path ahead was perilous, filled with obstacles and dangers they had not yet imagined. But the human walked forward, no longer just a victim of circumstance, but a seeker of truth, armed with courage, guided by the artifact, and ready to confront the galaxy that had once declared them guilty. The human had traveled farther than they had ever imagined, leaving the burning city and hostile patrols behind. The alien wilderness was vast, strange, and alive. Every step carried a sense of discovery as well as danger. The artifact, now securely in their possession, pulsed faintly, as if alive, as if aware of the human's thoughts and intentions. It had not spoken again since the first recognition, but its presence was undeniable. There was comfort in its quiet glow, a reassurance that they were no longer alone in this fight for truth. For days, the human journeyed through rugged terrain, crossing alien rivers that glowed with bioluminescent life, and climbing cliffs that seemed impossibly steep. The sky shifted constantly, sometimes filled with swirling storms, sometimes calm and empty, revealing countless stars beyond imagination. The human had learned to read the signs of this strange world, the direction of the winds, the paths, of the strange creatures that moved at night, the subtle hints of safe routes. Every decision was a calculation, every movement a balance between speed and caution. The wilderness was unforgiving, but the human had grown resilient out at night, when they rested in small caves or under the branches of enormous alien trees. The human reflected on the path that had brought them here. The accusation, the holding chamber, the escape, it all seemed surreal now, like the fragments of someone else's life. Fear had been a constant companion, but it had taught them patience and focus. Determination had grown in its place, and now purpose guided every step. They were no longer fleeing merely to survive. They were seeking something greater. The artifact had begun to respond to them in subtle ways. When danger approached, it pulsed with warmth or a faint vibration. When the human paused to consider a path, it seemed to shift slightly, almost guiding them without words. It was not just a tool or a device. It was a companion, a guardian, and a teacher. Though silent, it radiated intelligence and power beyond comprehension. And the human, for all their skill and training, felt both awe and humility in its presence. One afternoon, while crossing a vast plateau, the human noticed signs of previous travelers. The ground was marked with strange symbols etched into stone, faint trails that suggested someone or something had passed this way long ago. Curiosity mingled with caution. Could these markings be related to the artifact, or perhaps to other seekers of truth like themselves? The human studied them carefully, tracing the patterns with gloved fingers, and began to understand that this place had once been sacred. A civilization older than memory had left its mark, and somehow the artifact was part of their legacy. As night fell, The human made camp near the edge of a canyon, the stars above more vivid than any they had ever seen. They sat silently, listening to the hum of the artifact, feeling its quiet presence. Then, unexpectedly, it spoke not with words, but with a sensation, a flood of understanding and emotion that filled their mind. The artifact revealed glimpses of its power, visions of truth being revealed, injustice being overturned, lives saved. The human felt the weight of its purpose, the responsibility they now carried. They were no longer just a fugitive. They were a bearer of justice, chosen to confront falsehood and corruption wherever it arose. The next day, the human continued their journey toward the ruins described in the whispers they had heard among the guards. The path was treacherous. Rivers of molten rock cut through valleys. Alien plants released clouds of spores that could disorient or poison, and predators moved silently beneath the canopy, watching. The human had to rely not only on skill, but on intuition, on an understanding of the alien environment that had grown sharper with every step. The artifact guided them subtly, its light pulsing more brightly when danger was near and dimming when the path was safe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the human reached the entrance to the ancient ruins. Massive stone structures jutted from the ground, covered in vines that glowed faintly with bioluminescence. The air was thick with energy, as if the ruins themselves were alive, resonating with some ancient force. The human approached cautiously, their heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. They knew the artifact was near its full power, and that the next steps would test not just their courage, but the very core of their character. Inside the ruins, the air was cool and still, carrying a faint hum that resonated with the artifact. The walls were etched with symbols and images depicting the rise and fall of civilizations, scenes of justice and corruption, battles fought in the name of truth. The human could feel the weight of history pressing down, a reminder that they were part of something much larger than themselves. Each step forward was an act of courage, each breath a promise to honor the responsibility now entrusted to them. In the center of the ruins, they found a chamber unlike anything they had seen. The walls shimmered faintly, the floor pulsed with energy, and in the middle hovered the true form of the artifact, a crystalline, rotating structure, glowing with a light that shifted between colors, illuminating the chamber in soft waves. The artifact sensed their presence and began to move, aligning itself with the human, testing, observing. The human felt a rush of emotion, fear, excitement, awe, and a deep, resonant sense of purpose dot the artifact that initiated the first trial. The human felt images and scenarios appear in their mind, situations of moral choice, moments where the line between right and wrong was blurred. They were forced to confront their own decisions, their own values, their own fears. Each vision tested their judgment, their ability to act with fairness and integrity. The human realized that the artifact did not simply judge action. It judged intention, courage, and the capacity to uphold truth even in the face of extreme adversity. Hours passed as the human navigated the visions, responding with honesty and conviction. Some were painful, showing moments of doubt and fear, yet each was necessary. The artifact responded to their choices, its light pulsing brighter as they proved worthy, dimming when hesitation or self-interest emerged. It was a trial not of strength or skill, but of character, and the human felt themselves growing, understanding that the power they sought was tied as much to inner resolve as to any external force. Finally, the artifact recognized the human fully. A warm, resonant glow enveloped them, filling every sense with a quiet certainty. They were no longer merely a human accused of a crime. They were the bearer of justice, chosen to confront lies, reveal truth, and protect the innocent. The artifact imbued them with subtle enhancements, a heightened awareness, an ability to sense deceit, and a deeper understanding of morality. The human felt the weight of this gift, but also its clarity. Their purpose was now unmistakable, and the path ahead, though still dangerous, was defined. With the artifact now fully aligned with them, the human began the journey back toward the alien council, the city that had accused them, and the worlds that awaited the revelation of truth. The ruins faded behind them, but their lessons remained. Every step, every decision, every moment of courage and patience had prepared them for the confrontation to come. They knew that the council would not easily accept their return, or the truth the artifact revealed, but they were ready. Fear had been replaced by purpose, and uncertainty by clarity. The human traveled swiftly but cautiously, using the artifact to detect danger and avoid traps or patrols. They moved with a confidence that had been born of survival, training, and the affirmation of the artifact. Each night, as they rested, beneath alien skies, the artifact pulsed softly, a reminder that they were not alone and that truth could no longer be hidden. The journey back was not merely a return. It was a transformation, a preparation for the role they had been chosen to fulfill. Along the way, they encountered signs of other travelers, perhaps victims of false accusations or wanderers seeking truth. The human felt a responsibility to guide them, to offer hope, even in small ways. The artifact responded, glowing warmly, as if acknowledging that justice was not only a personal mission, but a universal one. Every life touched, every injustice corrected, added to the power and purpose of their journey. As the human approached the outskirts of the alien city once more, they paused. From here, the confrontation would begin. The council had assumed guilt, dismissed evidence, and ignored reason. But now, the human carried proof, power, and purpose. They would show the galaxy that truth could not be silenced, that justice could not be denied, and that even one human, armed with courage and the artifact, could challenge the authority of worlds. The human drew a deep breath, feeling the artifact pulse in response. It was time. The journey back had been long, difficult, and transformative, but the moment of reckoning had arrived. They were no longer the accused. They were the bearer of something far greater. And as they stepped into the alien world once more, the human knew that the story of injustice was ending, and the story of truth was about to begin. The human moved closer to the city they had once fled. From a distance, it looked smaller now, fragile compared to the vast wilderness and the ancient ruins they had crossed. But they knew that appearances were deceiving. Inside those walls, the alien council waited, confident in their judgment, certain that the human was guilty. They would not give up power lightly, and they would not listen to reason. The human had to be careful. Every step needed planning, every move calculated. Yet there was no fear-only determination, sharpened by the journey and guided by the artifact dot as they approached the city limits. The human observed the patrols carefully. The guards were more vigilant than before, perhaps expecting a fugitive to return. The streets were patrolled with drones that hovered silently, scanning for life forms. The human crouched in shadow, watching patterns, waiting for the right moment. The artifact pulsed faintly, almost nudging them forward, a quiet reassurance that they were ready for what lay ahead. Its glow seemed to light the path, guiding them with an invisible hand. Finally, under the cover of darkness, they entered the city. Every alleyway, every street corner was a potential trap, but the human had learned to move like a shadow, blending with the environment, making use of every hiding spot. The artifact's power was subtle but undeniable. It revealed hidden sensors, detected patrol routes, and warned of dangers before they were visible. The human had felt alone for so long, but now, with the artifact at their side, they felt unstoppable, prepared for the confrontation that was coming. The first challenge came sooner than expected. A group of guards blocked a narrow passage, their weapons raised, scanning for any sign of movement. The human held their breath, staying perfectly still. The artifact pulsed softly, and for a brief moment the guards seemed to falter, as if the presence of truth disturbed them. Using the shadows and the artifact's subtle guidance, the humans slipped past unnoticed, heart-pounding, every sense alert. They were getting closer. Finally, they reached the council chambers. From the outside, it looked as imposing as ever, a massive structure of polished stone and alien symbols that glowed faintly. The air around it thrummed with authority, with centuries of power and control. The human paused, feeling the weight of history pressing down, but the artifact glowed warmly, reassuring them. This was their moment. They had endured the impossible, crossed hostile lands, and proven themselves to a force beyond comprehension. Now, they would confront the council and show the truth. Inside, the council was in session. The same alien leaders floated above the floor, their expressions hard, their postures proud. The humans stepped forward, letting the glow of the artifact illuminate the chamber. At first, the council seemed startled. They had assumed the human would remain a fugitive, trapped, or eliminated. But now, the light filled the room, and an undeniable presence announced itself. The artifact pulsed, and the human felt the weight of truth surging through them. "You return," one of the leaders said, voice sharp and wary. "After being declared guilty, you dare to come back?" The human did not answer with words. Instead, they extended the artifact, letting its light fill the chamber. The glow revealed hidden details, evidence that had been overlooked, signs of sabotage, and records that had been altered to implicate the human falsely. The council members shifted uneasily as the artifact illuminated every corner of the room, exposing deception that they could not deny. The human began to speak, their voice steady, calm, but firm. "I did not destroy your colony. There was sabotage. Evidence was hidden. Lies were spread to blame me. But this artifact sees truth. It knows what happened. I am not guilty. The real cause is here, and it can be revealed." The chamber was silent. The alien council, confident in their authority, now faced a power they could not control. The artifact pulsed again, and visions appeared, not just for the human, but for all present. Scenes of the sabotage played out in vivid clarity, machines being tampered with, security protocols bypassed, the real culprits acting in secret. There was no room for doubt. The human had been falsely accused. Some council members turned pale, their pride wounded by the undeniable truth. Others glared, unwilling to admit that their judgment had been flawed, that they had been manipulated. But the artifact's authority was absolute. It could not be argued with or ignored. The human felt a sense of justice flowing through them, a quiet satisfaction that was tempered by the responsibility now resting on their shoulders. The council could no longer deny the evidence. One by one, they spoke, acknowledging the truth. Apologies were offered, though halting and imperfect. The human listened, but their focus remained on the artifact, knowing that the journey was not over. Justice had been revealed, but it had to be enforced. The artifact had given them the means to do so, but it was up to the human to wield it wisely. The first step was to ensure that the real culprits were brought to justice. Using the artifact, the human identified those who had manipulated events, the individuals who had sought to hide the truth and frame them. The council could now act decisively, guided by the undeniable proof the artifact provided. What had been a story of accusation and fear was now a story of revelation and accountability. Yet, the human did not seek vengeance. Their goal was not punishment, but restoration. They had been falsely accused, and they had suffered, but their purpose was larger, to ensure that justice could not be ignored, that truth could not be silenced. The artifact, glowing steadily at their side, seemed to affirm this, a quiet presence reminding them that power must be tempered with wisdom. As the chamber emptied and the council members departed to address the consequences, The human remained behind for a moment, standing in the quiet glow of the artifact. They felt the full weight of what had happened. They had been accused of a crime they did not commit, hunted, isolated, and threatened. They had escaped, endured trials, and confronted forces far beyond what they had imagined. And yet, they had emerged not only victorious, but transformed, carrying the power to reveal truth, to protect the innocent, and to ensure that justice would be recognized. The human left the council chambers and stepped into the streets once more. The city, once a place of fear and accusation, now seemed different. There was a sense of possibility, of hope. The artifact pulsed softly, its light a reminder that justice was not a one-time event, but a continuous responsibility. The human knew that the journey ahead would be difficult. There were still those who resisted change, those who sought to maintain control through fear and deception. But for the first time, the human felt not just hope, but certainty. They moved through the city, quietly observing. Patrols no longer challenged them. Citizens who had once whispered in fear now looked with curiosity and cautious respect. Word of the revelation had begun to spread. The human realized that their role had expanded. They were no longer just an individual seeking to prove innocence. They were a symbol of justice, a reminder that truth mattered, that false accusations could be overturned, and that courage and perseverance could prevail even against overwhelming odds. As the sun set and the alien sky darkened, the human found a quiet place to rest, the artifact glowing softly beside them. They reflected on what had happened, the journey from accusation to revelation, the trials faced in the wilderness, the confrontation with the council, and the moment when truth was finally recognized. It had been a journey of endurance, courage, and transformation. They had been tested in every way, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of the responsibility now entrusted to them. The artifact pulsed gently, as if acknowledging their thoughts. The human understood that this was not the end. The galaxy was vast, filled with injustice, deception, and challenges that required courage and integrity. They had been chosen for this role, not merely because of skill or strength, but because of the capacity to act with fairness, wisdom, and compassion. The human now carried not just the artifact, but the mantle of responsibility it represented. They thought of the future. The artifact had revealed its power, and the council had acknowledged the truth. But there were other worlds, other councils, other injustices waiting to be addressed. The human's journey was far from over. They had been accused, hunted, and transformed. And now they would use their newfound strength and insight to bring balance, to ensure that justice was recognized wherever it was needed. For the first time in weeks, the human felt a sense of peace. The fear that had dominated their life was gone, replaced by purpose and clarity. They had faced impossible odds, endured hardship, and confronted powerful forces, and they had emerged not only alive, but transformed. The artifact pulsed at their side, a quiet companion, a reminder that they were no longer alone in their mission. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, guided by truth, justice, and courage. As night deepened and stars glittered across the alien sky, the human looked out over the city. They knew the council would act to restore order and correct the wrongs, but their role was not finished. They had been chosen for a reason, and the artifact's recognition had given them a responsibility far greater than survival. They would ensure that truth was seen, that justice was served, and that no one would suffer from false accusations again. With a final glance at the glowing artifact, the human prepared. The human had proven their innocence, and the council had acknowledged the truth. But the galaxy was far from safe. While the artifact had revealed deception and cleared their name, not everyone welcomed this change. Rogue factions and hidden conspirators, who had benefited from lies and false accusations, now viewed the human as a threat. Their rise as a symbol of truth and justice had made powerful enemies. It was one thing to survive accusations and prove innocence. It was another to defend countless innocents from those who sought chaos and control. The first threat came quietly. While moving through the outskirts of a neutral colony, the human sensed an unusual presence. The artifact pulsed sharply, warning of unseen danger. Shadows moved along the walls, and distant sounds hinted at patrols or scouts watching from hidden positions. The human's heart raced, not with fear, but with focus. Years of training, the harsh trials of the wilderness, and the artifact's guidance had prepared them for this. They moved silently, blending with the environment, observing patterns, and waiting for the right moment. A group of armed figures appeared, attempting to ambush them. The human could see their intentions clearly, thanks to the artifact. These were not ordinary soldiers, they were hired mercenaries, organized and trained, their mission to capture or eliminate the human before they could expose further conspiracies. The human did not panic. Instead, they analyzed the terrain, the positioning of the attackers, and the possible escape routes. Every move was deliberate, every breath controlled. With precision, they used the environment to their advantage, forcing the attackers into traps and distractions. The first encounter was brief but decisive. The human neutralized the threat without unnecessary violence, relying on speed, strategy, and the artifact's subtle powers. The attackers retreated, and the human remained unharmed. Yet, they knew this was only the beginning. If rogue factions were willing to go to such lengths, there would be more attempts, more dangers, and higher stakes. The responsibility of justice had become not only about revealing truth, but also about defending it against those who preferred deception. The human continued their journey, moving from colony to colony, investigating signs of unrest and corruption. Everywhere they went, the artifact guided them, revealing hidden evidence of manipulation, sabotage, and exploitation. It became clear that the conspiracy was vast, spanning multiple worlds, with many individuals working to maintain power through lies. The human realized that they could no longer act as a lone seeker of truth. They had to protect the innocent and ensure that justice reached every corner of the galaxy. During one mission, the human encountered a colony under siege. The leaders had been bribed or coerced by hidden factions, and the citizens were suffering as a result. Buildings had been damaged, supplies stolen, and fear had taken root among the population. The human entered quietly, assessing the situation. Using the artifact, they detected traps, monitored movements of the aggressors, and identified those responsible for the corruption. Every decision was critical. One wrong move could put innocent lives at risk. They acted swiftly. The artifact revealed the culprits, and the human confronted them, using strategy rather than brute force. Some attempted to resist, but the human's intelligence, agility, and the artifact's subtle powers ensured that resistance was futile. Citizens who had been fearful began to observe, their eyes widening in disbelief as the human revealed the truth. The corrupt leaders were exposed, their plans dismantled, and the colony slowly began to recover. The human did not seek personal gain or recognition. They only ensured that justice was restored and that the innocent were safe. The journey was exhausting. The human moved continuously, navigating unfamiliar worlds, alien terrains, and complex political systems. Each colony had its own challenges, its own threats, and its own stakes. The artifact pulsed constantly, a guide and a companion, alerting them to danger and helping to reveal hidden truths. The human had to adapt to every situation, balancing caution with action, diplomacy with confrontation, and strategy with morality. Every decision mattered, because the lives of countless beings now rested on their judgment. During one particularly tense encounter, the human discovered a hidden faction that had been manipulating multiple colonies simultaneously. They had spies, saboteurs, and agents working in secret, spreading false accusations, inciting fear, and maintaining control. The human knew that confronting this group would be difficult. They were organized, ruthless, and experienced. But the artifact pulsed with certainty, confirming that the human had the capability to expose them and protect the innocent. The human devised a plan. Using intelligence gathered from observing the faction's movements, they created a series of diversions, exposing key operatives and revealing hidden evidence to the authorities and citizens of affected colonies. The confrontations were intense, with moments of close danger, but the human remained calm, relying on strategy and the artifact's guidance. One by one, the conspirators were revealed, their networks dismantled, and their plans thwarted. The humans' actions restored order, but they also sent a message. Lies could no longer thrive in the presence of truth and courage. Amidst these challenges, the human also began to inspire others. Citizens who had once felt powerless began to step forward, assisting in the protection of their communities, spreading truth and resisting manipulation. The artifact, though silent to them, seemed to recognize this growing support, its glow brightening as the human's influence spread. The human realized that justice was not a solitary endeavor. It required courage, collaboration, and unwavering commitment. By showing integrity and strength, they encouraged others to act boldly and honestly. Despite the progress, danger remained constant. Rogue factions were relentless, seeking revenge and attempting to regain influence. Ambushes, traps, and attacks came at unpredictable moments. The human had to stay alert at all times, blending observation with action, patience with decisiveness. Each challenge tested not only their skills, but also their moral judgment. They could not simply destroy those who opposed them. They had to ensure that justice, fairness, and truth guided every response. In one particularly harrowing encounter, the human faced a group that had captured innocent civilians to use as leverage. The artifact guided them to a hidden entrance, revealing the captors' positions and weaknesses. The human moved with precision, neutralizing threats and freeing the civilians without harm. Watching the grateful faces of those who had suffered, the human understood the true weight of their role. Justice was not abstract. It was real, tangible, and deeply human. It involved protecting lives, restoring trust, and confronting those who exploited fear. As the human continued to move from colony to colony, they noticed a change in the galaxy. Fear and manipulation were slowly being replaced by hope and courage. Communities began to act in solidarity, seeking truth and supporting one another against injustice. The artifact pulsed steadily, confirming the positive impact of the humans' efforts. They understood that their journey was far from complete. But each small victory reinforced the idea that even one determined individual could spark widespread change. The human also reflected on their own transformation. They were no longer simply accused, hunted, or isolated. They had become a force for justice, a protector of the innocent, and a symbol of truth. The artifact had amplified their abilities, but it was their courage, intelligence, and moral clarity that made them truly powerful. They had learned that justice required action, patience, and unwavering commitment, and that protecting others often meant facing danger without hesitation. By the time the twin suns rose over a distant colony, the human paused to observe the recovery efforts. Citizens worked together to rebuild, sharing knowledge, repairing infrastructure, and restoring trust. The human watched silently, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The artifact pulsed softly, a reminder that their mission was ongoing but meaningful. Each step forward, each life saved, and each deception revealed contributed to a growing wave of justice that could not be ignored. The human knew the rogue factions would continue to resist, but they also knew that the galaxy now had hope. Truth had been revealed, justice had been restored in multiple places, and the seeds of courage had been planted across worlds. With the artifact by their side, they were prepared to face whatever challenges came next, confident in the knowledge that integrity, strategy, and determination could overcome even the most entrenched deception. As night fell over the recovering colony, the humans stood on a high ledge overlooking the city. The lights flickered below, a mix of alien colors and life returning to the streets. They could feel the weight of responsibility pressing gently on them. But it was not a burden, it was a purpose. The artifact glowed warmly, resonating with their determination. They had survived accusation, confronted deception, and protected the innocent. The journey was far from over, but they had proven that courage, truth, and justice were not just ideals, they were real, powerful forces that could change the galaxy. With a final glance at the city below, the humans set their sights on the horizon. Other colonies awaited guidance, other conspiracies lurked in shadows, and other innocent lives needed protection. They would continue to move, guided by the artifact, driven by justice. The human had traveled far, faced impossible challenges, and proven their innocence. They had endured false accusations, harsh trials, hostile wilderness, and dangerous conspiracies. Now, as they moved across the galaxy, they carried not only the artifact, but also the responsibility of justice, truth, and protection of the innocent. The journey that had started with fear and desperation had transformed into one of purpose, courage, and vision. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless worlds, civilizations, and stories. In many places, injustice still lingered. Rogue factions, corrupt leaders, and hidden manipulators continued to exploit fear and deception. But the human had become more than a survivor. They were a symbol of justice, a living proof that truth could overcome lies. Wherever they went, the artifact pulsed softly, guiding them, illuminating hidden dangers, and revealing the true nature of those around them. One world in particular demanded their attention. It was a sprawling colony where the ruling council had long ignored cries for help, suppressing evidence and punishing those who dared speak the truth. Citizens lived in fear, and the corrupt leaders maintained control through intimidation. As the human approached, they could sense the tension in the air. The artifact's glow pulsed brighter, signaling that the time for action had come. The human began by observing the city from the outskirts. The streets were crowded, yet heavy with silence, as if the people were afraid even to breathe. Guards patrolled openly, their presence a constant reminder of authority and fear. The human noticed patterns, the timing of patrols, the areas where citizens could hide, and the places where corruption had taken root. Every detail mattered. Strategy, patience, and careful observation were crucial. They could not act recklessly, for the lives of innocents depended on their choices. For days, the human monitored the city. They identified key figures responsible for oppression, discovered hidden messages of hope left by courageous citizens, and mapped secret routes through the urban labyrinth. The artifact guided them in subtle ways, revealing hidden traps, detecting deception, and offering insights that no ordinary person could perceive. The human felt the weight of responsibility heavily, but also a quiet confidence that they were ready. They had faced worse before and survived. This would be no different. The first action came quietly. Under the cover of night, the human infiltrated the council's archives. Files and records revealed a shocking depth of corruption-manipulated votes, falsified reports, and deliberate suppression of evidence. The human documented everything, the artifact recording truth in a way that could not be denied. This was the proof that would confront the council, expose the conspirators, and restore faith in justice. Every detail mattered, for the lives and reputations of countless innocents rested upon these revelations. The human then moved to rally support. They sought out citizens who had secretly resisted, those who had quietly upheld truth in the shadows. With guidance from the artifact, they communicated carefully, inspiring courage and organizing efforts to protect the innocent. The human was not a dictator or ruler. They acted as a guide, a beacon of truth, helping others see that resistance was possible and that justice could prevail. Gradually, a small network of supporters began to form, ready to act alongside them when the moment arrived. The confrontation with the council was inevitable. The human entered the grand chamber, artifact glowing brightly, illuminating every corner. The council members were surprised, wary, and angry. They had assumed the human would remain powerless, hidden, or silenced. But now, the room was filled with undeniable evidence, presented by one who had endured trials beyond comprehension. The artifact pulsed, revealing manipulated documents, hidden agreements, and proof of corruption. The council could not deny what was shown. "You return," one leader demanded, voice trembling with anger and fear. "Do you come to defy us?" The human's voice was calm, steady, and firm. "I return not to defy, but to reveal the truth. For too long, lies have ruled this world. Innocent lives have been affected. Now, the truth cannot be ignored. This artifact bears witness. It sees what is hidden, judges what is fair, and confirms what is real." The chamber fell silent as the artifact pulsed, displaying visions of the injustices committed by those in power. Records of falsified evidence, secret punishments, and manipulation appeared for all to see. Citizens who had been silenced whispered in awe, some stepping forward in recognition. The council members were forced to confront undeniable truth. Their authority had been based on deception, and the human had revealed it completely. Some attempted excuses, but the artifact's glow left no room for lies. Its power was absolute in exposing truth. The human calmly addressed each attempt at deception, explaining the evidence and revealing the depth of corruption. Slowly, the council realized their position was untenable. They could no longer claim innocence or authority without scrutiny. The human's presence, the artifact's recognition, and the evidence combined to make denial impossible. Once the council accepted the truth, the human guided the process of correction. The corrupt leaders were removed, replaced by individuals chosen for integrity and wisdom. Systems were repaired, evidence restored, and citizens were given a voice. The human's role was not to control, but to ensure that justice was applied fairly, that decisions were transparent, and that deception could no longer dominate. Across the colony, a sense of relief and hope began to spread. Citizens saw that courage and truth could make a difference. Even after the council had been corrected, challenges remained. Rogue factions who had opposed the human continued to lurk in shadows, plotting to regain power. The human anticipated these threats, using the artifact to monitor movements and predict actions. With careful strategy, they intervened before harm could occur, often preventing crises without the public ever knowing. Their actions were subtle, precise, and effective, proving that justice sometimes required foresight and restraint as much as courage. The human's journey expanded beyond a single world. Word spread across neighboring systems about the bearer of justice, a human who had endured false accusations, survived, and now upheld truth wherever it was needed. They became a symbol, a reminder that courage, intelligence, and integrity could challenge even the most entrenched power. Colonies that had been silent out of fear began to organize, guided by the example of one who refused to let injustice prevail. At the same time, the human continued to reflect on their own path. They had started as an accused, hunted, and alone, fearing for survival. The trials in the wilderness, the confrontations with the council, the challenges of rogue factions, all had transformed them. They were stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. They understood that justice was not merely about punishment or accusation. It was about protecting the innocent, restoring balance, and inspiring others to act with integrity. The artifact remained at their side, a constant companion, glowing softly with recognition and approval. It had tested them, guided them, and now confirmed their role as the true bearer of justice. Its presence reminded the human that their mission was ongoing. The galaxy was vast, Injustice was widespread, and the responsibility they carried required vigilance. Yet, they no longer felt the fear and uncertainty that had marked the beginning of their journey. They were ready, capable, and determined. As time passed, the human traveled from world to world, exposing deception, dismantling corrupt networks, and protecting the innocent. Each mission reinforced the principles they had learned: courage, patience, wisdom, and integrity. Citizens began to trust that truth could prevail, and communities slowly rebuilt systems based on fairness and accountability. The human realized that justice was not a destination, it was a continuous effort, a commitment to act rightly in every situation. Eventually, the human returned to the ruins where they had first discovered the artifact. Standing before the crystalline structure, they reflected on the journey. The artifact pulsed warmly, as if acknowledging their accomplishments. The human realized that their life had been forever changed. They had been accused, hunted, and tested, but they had emerged as a force for good, a protector of truth, and a symbol of courage. They understood that their story was not just their own, but a message to the galaxy, that even in the darkest moments, one person could uphold justice and inspire others to do the same. With the artifact as their guide, the human knew that their mission would continue. Rogue factions, corruption, and injustice would persist, but so would the commitment to truth. Every life they protected, every deception they exposed, every community they helped rebuild, added to the strength of a galaxy that could no longer be ruled by fear. The human had become a living embodiment of justice, and their presence alone reminded the universe that lies and deceit could not endure forever. As they left the ruins, the human looked out over the horizon, the light of distant suns reflecting off alien landscapes. The galaxy stretched endlessly, full of challenges, mysteries, and opportunities to act with courage. They felt a profound sense of peace, not because the journey was complete, but because they were ready to continue it. Armed with experience, wisdom, and the artifact, they would face whatever lay ahead, protecting the innocent and upholding justice wherever it was needed. And so, the human walked forward, a symbol